Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Corporate Services, Climate Change and Scrutiny Management Committee. For any members of the public who are not familiar with this building, if you need to use the facilities, they're just behind me on my left. As you'll be aware, this meeting is being webcast, so welcome to all those who are watching at home. If I begin with declarations of interest, can the members have any interest they wish to declare that's not already on their members' register of interest? No. Thank you very much. The minutes, we've got two lots of minutes to consider. The first are the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of October. Excuse me. Do members have any matters of accuracy that they wish to raise on those minutes? I have just one. On page 11, it shows the start time of the meeting as 4:32. I think it was 5:32. You see, adding value already. So are members happy to approve those minutes? Thank you. That moves us on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of November. So again, any comments from members on those minutes? I had one comment at the bottom of page 10, monitoring and tracking of approved council motions. It might be worth making mention that we had received an update on the day from one officer, which could be reflected in the minutes in terms of the substance of that update, if we're happy to do that. And on page 11, Roman numeral 2 under resolved, Chair and Vice Chair review the format of future motions reports. If we can add with a view to a further report coming to this committee. We did have a discussion around whether it be 3 months, 6 months, but there was acknowledgement that once we've had a look at the format, we do want to receive an updated report to have a better view as to the status of the actions arising from those council motions. So with that change, are members content to approve those? Thank you. Okay, so we move to agenda item 3, which is public participation. We have one registered speaker this evening, that is Gwen Swinburne. So can I invite you to come to the table, Gwen? As you know, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. So
thank you, Chair.
Please start in your own time.
Thanks for sorting it out. Thank you, Chair. This devolution business removes the most important strategic decisions and responsibilities from this authority. There have been virtually no combined authority reports to any committee in this place. I have been raising this insistently, some might say, for many months. The plan agreed by our statutory officers, and I assume the administration, was that you would get the combined authority constitution at some point in the future by email. Zero democratic oversight by us over what is the largest snatch of power in your history. In his wisdom, 2 days ago, our monitoring officer sent you a 382-page private addendum. Per norm, officers didn't say what this item was for us out here. I discovered it was the combined authority draft constitution to be discussed by you behind closed doors. So yet further desperate appeals to members, and on Friday, a further item appeared, no explanation, a 250-page public, apparently draft version, which any registered speaker and member is supposed to read and comment on in 7 working hours. But it gets worse. There are 130 pages missing. What are they? There is zero explanation on the agenda. How can democracy possibly be served? We know that under the last two administrations, not this one, members fought tooth and nail for transparency and public participation and engagement, at least in committees. This seems disappearing in plain sight. It is impossible to give this constitution more than a cursory scan. I expect many in this room, perhaps by design, haven't read this. I haven't either. Members, you cannot allow yourselves and this authority to be so marginalised by your officers and others here and in another place. Anything other than a resolution to defer any consideration of this to a committee early in the new year is, in my view, a dereliction of your duties, notwithstanding the pressure applied to you. You know how important these constitutions are, well beyond any political and transparency niceties. You being denied any say. This isn't the transparency we were promised by the incoming administration. It's now or never, members. Thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you, Ms. Swinburne. Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item 4, which is finance and performance quarter 2. If I can invite Debbie Mitchell and Ian Cunningham to join us. I had received a late notice request to move this item down to after item 7. I understand Councillor Lomas had been hoping to join us this evening, but has been delayed. I wasn't expecting Councillor Lomas. She would obviously have been welcome. If in the course of our discussion on this paper there are any questions that Ian and Debbie you're not able to answer that would need to be relayed to Councillor Lomas, and we can make a note of those and ask for separate responses to be made. Okay, so over to you.
Yeah, good evening. I'll just do a very brief introduction. So this is the Finance and Performance Monitor 2 that was presented to Executive last month. As you can see from the report, the serious financial concerns continue, and work by officers continues on identifying mitigations and other potential savings. Just by way of update, we are starting to see some small improvements in the forecast, so the cost control measures are starting to take and have an impact. But it's not improving quickly enough, and therefore it still remains an issue of serious concern, really. So that's just a brief overview. There's some performance information. Ian, you want to say anything on the performance?
Yeah, so while the finance remains challenging, there's 4 or 5 performance sections there, from complaints to sickness, and actually we've got some continued good organisation performance on most of those areas. We talked about the last committee, and yeah, those are improvements in performance continue.
Thank you very much. Admirably succinct. Just to say to members, I'd like us to focus on paragraphs 8 to 24 of the report. That covers the service areas within the remit of this committee. The other scrutiny committees will be receiving, or will have received, a quarter 2 monitor covering the areas that will be relevant to their committee. So I do want this committee to focus on those areas of council business that are for us to scrutinise. So with that, I will open it up to members if there are any questions they would like to ask of officers. Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the report, officers. I don't know if you can answer this question, but when you see these reports and you sort of read about the efforts that are being made to sort of help ease our financial position, I do often wonder, will we ever get there if we just keep trying to find little trims here and there and savings here and there? And I'm wondering if within the service areas that come under this committee, is there work going on that could be classed as a sort of proper reset to sort of work out what a fresh start would look like and what those costs would involve, rather than just, this is what we're currently spending, how can we save bits? Be good to know a bit about that, really. Because in a way, as bad as things are, we should almost use that to be quite radical with looking at how different teams are working.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And we are looking as part of for the work for next year. Some of this will be coming to executive in January, and then full council for budget setting in February. But we will be looking at a service review, and in particular looking at customers and the customer experience. That's something that we're going to consider in a bit more detail, and looking at that. What do we want the service to be like? What can we afford? How do things need to change? But there's no getting away from the fact that, as I think I've mentioned, I think you're all aware, the medium-term financial strategy requires that significant savings to be achieved, and therefore you're right, we can't carry on just taking a bit off here and a bit off there. It does need that fundamental review of many areas, and the organisation needs to be smaller in order to manage within the budget that it can afford.
Thank you.
It's not a supplementary, Chair. It's a totally different question.
Carry on.
I don't sense there's a large queue. So,
Okay, carry on.
So just wondering, what communications have gone to every known dwelling in the city to communicate the financial position, as opposed to putting bits out online every now and then and hoping people happen to see them?
I'm not sure that either of us can answer that question, honestly, unless you can, Ian.
So historically, I don't know what's gone out to the wider city, but I know the organisation has invested in some of the ways we communicate. So there's a platform within the organisation called Gov Delivery that has an awful lot of residents who have signed up to that through the Gov Notify process. And that's been tidied up and organised, and that's containing a number of the financial messages out to residents at the moment. I would think that with an upcoming budget in the new year, additional work will go on there, and some thinking to make sure that we get out to the entire city and all audiences.
Thanks. Cheers.
Thank you. Councillor Widdowson.
Actually building on Councillor Taylor's first point, am I right in understanding that each area within the business pulls together a business plan, and within the business plan, which feeds up to each of the assistant directors and directors, you've got all the various different projects? Would that be a sensible way where we can review and have a look at where work could be done differently, or am I misunderstanding it?
Well, I'll take that one. So yes, within the organisation, we have a performance management cycle, of which part of that is service planning, business planning, and that commits the organisation to twice a year at a senior level to write business plans about their areas. Those cycles normally run around about the autumn time and after the budget. Okay, so we reflect back as an organisation about what we're able to do in terms of service delivery and the actual changes that are happening there. They're not documents that we've put too much out in the public domain previously. Some of those are around internal structures and internal delivery mechanisms. And I think I'd probably just say to assure the committee that when those documents are written, they are scrutinised by the corporate management team. They're normally discussed with their executive member at the same time to make sure that they're feasible. And key actions are put out in some of those residents' consultations. So we've just been through the business plan cycle, and we'll reflect again as an organisation after March.
Supplementary?
Just a little bit of detail. Has every area completed their business plan, their service plan?
So we're just finishing off the cycle at the moment. So there is a couple left to come in. Previously, when we did the last round, which I think was April last year, we had a business plan from everybody. And I'd expect by this Christmas, they'll all be in place. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Merritt.
Yeah, if I can turn to some of the detail in the report. Can I ask first of all about the customer and communities and the 600k pressure from the continued shift to universal credit? I mean, we've known about about the changes that were going on. So can I ask why this is coming in as an additional pressure? Did we not adequately budget for this continued shift that's been going on, or is there some other factor in there?
I only have a very tenuous grasp of how universal credit works and the interrelationship with housing benefit. And I think what I would, if it's okay, Councillor Merritt, I will go away and get you a written response, because I would need to just check with other officers. It's not that we didn't budget for it, it's more of an unforeseen consequence in terms of how the overpayments work and when somebody's been overpaid benefit. But I kind of only understand it when somebody's in the room explaining it to me, and then as soon as I leave the room, it tends to leave my head, unfortunately, because it is just quite complicated. So if it's okay, I'll go away and get a written response.
Thank you.
Can I also ask about the 175k increase on the audit? That is 175k increase on what sum? And I thought we agree a budget beforehand. So why is such a substantial overspend come in?
Unfortunately, we have no option around that. That was under the public sector audit appointment. So the PSAA, how we appoint our auditors, and they do a consultation on the fee. But due to, you might be aware of a lot of problems in the local government audit sector, and a lot of councils haven't had their accounts signed off. And that was a fee that was agreed by the PSAA on behalf of all councils. So unfortunately, we were not given any option in that, and it was about roughly a doubling of the audit fee. So that 175k pressure was almost double what the original budget was.
This is a supplementary. I noticed the table of paragraph 8, the variance on the governance line. Would the external audit fee be captured within that figure?
No, it's within the chief. It's within the chief finance officer line,
Okay.
the governance line. I'll just have to double check what's in that. But there was a number of overspends and unachieved savings. I think, wasn't it, Bryn? There was one on advertising income, and then there was an overspend on legal, which I think we've now resolved actually for Monitor 3, which is about charging the appropriate amount of staff through to capital.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple. I don't know if you want to sit both. The first one's sort of an observation and a question. In terms of presentation, these reports used to have Q1, Q2, and then to Q3, so we could see the movement. I'm not sure if that was a deliberate move to mess it off, but it's helpful to see that transition across the period of time. The two sort of key questions, I suppose, were the first on bottom of the table with the vacancy management of £1 million. Is that vacancy management across the whole of the council? Are there particular areas that are being protected, as it were, where staff are being doing, or is that being evenly distributed? And then my second question was around, I believe Customer and Communities has the communications budget in that one. Inside the government, okay, yeah. So having noticed that there has been no citywide budget consultation as yet, that would normally have gone out with the Our City magazine, and I have not seen, I noticed when pondering this, an Our City magazine. Has that been taken as a cost saving?
So yeah, in terms of just your point about the previous quarters in the report, we can do that. That's not a, it's just on our, an oversight on our part. So we will reinstate.
You added the mitigation column in, I think.
Yeah, probably, and I ran out of space.
Which is what bumped it up.
Probably right, one in, one out. So yes, we'll reinstate that. In terms of the vacancy management, that is well, it's kind of where it lands really, is where people are leaving, but we are being very tight on vacancies across the council. So we are recruiting to very essential posts. But this is just around those areas listed in the table. And we're well on the way with that, actually. We're about 3/4 of the way there with that £1 million target for this year. So we've really made good strides there. And Ian on the comments.
Yeah, so in terms of the budget consultation, we do usually go out around about this time of the year. There's been some internal conversation about how we might do it. I'd expect it to go out to residents, or some format to go out to residents just before Christmas, maybe just after. Obviously, the organisation knows we're doing an awful lot of consultations and engagement with residents at the moment, so they're going out. You asked a question about Our City. I'm not sure I know quite the answer on what we've done with the budget there, but I mentioned before about the Gov delivery platform, of which they've used that to put out the comms that we've previously put out within Our City. So it has been still reaching a similar, but not quite a universal audience.
Okay. So the question specifically was, has a conscious decision been made not to do paper copies of Our City and do it online only? And since when?
I'm aware, but I'm Claire. Would you mind? Claire, obviously Claire's in for the next item, so if it's all right, Chair.
Yeah.
Claire might be able to answer some of that. Sorry to put you on the spot, Claire.
So yes, there's a conscious decision not to print Our City at £25,000 an issue. It used to cost us something like £80,000 a year. We've replaced it with Gov Delivery, which has currently got a circulation of around about 5,500. We have 48,000 people via Twitter, 15,000 on Facebook, but I appreciate a large majority of the resident population, or a percentage of the resident population, are not online. We had particularly the budget. If we take the budget, because of the national news picture, that was picked up and carried by BBC TV, radio, and online, as was York Press, I think, have run 2 or 3 times, one double page spread, of course, online, and Yorkshire Post have run it. So we're basically supplementing our, particularly for the budget, the printed Our City with e-newsletter coupled with Media Moments, essentially. And you're absolutely right, it's a cost saving.
So
Thank
just
you.
simple follow-ups is
Sorry,
when,
Through the chair. Sorry. Did you have a supplementary?
it was just the rest of the question, when was that decision taken? How was that decision taken? And why was that never communicated to members who could have been promoting? I have no idea what the Gov Delivery thing is, so I can't tell my residents to sign up to it. So just when, how, and why was it not communicated to members?
When was the budget decision not to carry Our City? I think that was beginning of this year, I think April time. So it's part of the budget package for this year. The e-newsletter came into being about a month ago. I think we've issued 3 or 4 issues, and you're absolutely right. We should make sure ward members know. So I'll take that away as an action to make sure that happens, so that you can encourage sign up locally. That would be really helpful. Thank you.
So that's supplementary, Councillor Taylor. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. How do we weigh up the cost saving of, what was it, about £80,000, maybe a bit more for production? £80,000 on one hand of the scales versus what I would describe as the prospect of an even greater information and engagement deficit amongst the people of the city. Engagement in local council issues is poor anyway, because for the lay person, it's hard enough getting their head around national politics, let alone what's going on in the council. And I know there's a cost with these things, but sometimes the old ways work, and the old ways for so long, because you can guarantee that at least you can say to people, well, you've seen it, and if you've chosen not to read it properly, that's on you. But if we're just relying on online only, or online first, and only ever doing ad hoc hard copy stuff when people bang on the door too loudly about it, I think that's quite harmful. So how do we weigh that up? And I know it's awkward, but it really worries me. And I know I raise this every now and then, and it might sound like a broken record, but I'm quite happy to be a broken record for as long as it takes for this to change. Communication is vital, and cutting off hard copy communications is going to become an equalities issue. It already is, in my view. So how are we weighing that up? Sorry.
No, carry on. No, okay, no. I'm conscious this is not an agenda item on on council consultation. It's been raised in the context of a potential saving, in the context of a report on the council's financial position. So I don't want to go. I think you've identified an issue that this committee might want to come back and have a more in-depth discussion about. Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. With genuine respect, and I always appreciate your style. I think the point around me asking this question is, these challenges are massive. Communication is a fundamental part in the council meeting those challenges. This is a really specific, tangible piece of comms that helps with this broader conversation. And I think it's absolutely relevant to the conversation. And it's one of the reasons why the officer has come to the table.
Yeah.
The question was simply, how do we weigh up that cost saving versus the loss that we know it will create? And that's all I want answering. If you can put my
Okay.
speech to one side, you know.
No, that's fine. I don't know if Claire, you want to come back with
Yeah.
any observations?
So communications needs to make a budget saving of £150,000 this year and £100,000 next year. So I am really grateful for the support for communications because like you, I believe that communications is really important to residents. Unfortunately, and we're not alone amongst local authorities with this, we have to balance up available spend to deliver the statutory services, of course, versus those other items such as communications and how much as a council we can afford to invest in communications. I absolutely take your point though about understanding the impact, and I wonder if there is a ask of this committee for us to come back and look at some of those decisions that we are making and have made and what the impact on residents is. So for example, we could do we've done some channel work to find out where residents get their information from. Some of that's more readily available. We can bring all that back to the committee and have a look at it. And I don't like to quote Debbie Mitchell, but money doesn't grow on trees. So we are going to have to look at what we spend our money on, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I know as part of the member induction process, I know members were invited to a session looking at the Gov platform.
Yeah, Gov delivery platform,
which was useful. It might be worth repeating that session just so members have a fuller picture as to what that has a capability of providing. Had a couple of hands which I think were supplementary to Councillor Taylor's, but again, I'm conscious we've got a lot of business to get through. Councillor Widdowson.
It's a very short question, Chair. So the information that's been given by the officer was the decision was taken in April. I'd just like to understand how that decision was made, and maybe it comes back when we have a look at what Councillor Taylor is, because I don't recollect any decision coming to the previous administration.
So, well, Claire's explained there was a saving in the current year's budget and an anticipated saving in the next year's budget. So the officer's given an answer. I'm not sure if you want to add anything to.
No, that savings. No, that
Okay.
savings in the budget.
Okay, Councillor Eyre.
Yeah, mine was just agreeing with what Callum said and also rolling forward, because it's not just the cost in terms of what we're losing from residents. There is actually a cost. So we're doing numerous other consultations. So there's the cost of the LTP consultation that's happening now. You have to take that against the saving that you've taken. We'll be doing, I believe, a YouTube video, which will have a cost. All of those other costs of things that have been done instead of our city that needs to be weighed. So I don't think you will actually get any financial saving of £80,000 when you cross-reference all the other little bits of consultation you did. So I think you need to weigh up exactly as Councillor Taylor said, what have we lost in terms of resident engagement in the process, which will be the number of people going through each of the consultations compared to how many have gone through consultations previously, and also a proper financial analysis of saving £80,000 to spend £250,000 on ad hoc pieces of consultation.
I think one thing I would add is I'm aware that the local transport plan consultation there's a separate funding stream which was specifically devoted to that particular consultation. Just to set that frame. Claire, is there anything you want to say in response?
I was just going to repeat the same. DFT, Department for Transport, are funding the local transport plan consultation. But you are absolutely right. Doing a cost benefit analysis would be helpful, and we can bring that to this group.
Okay. Councillor Rowley, is it a follow on?
It's a new question, Chair.
If you hold the floor, I want to bring this line of questioning to end so we can move on to other questions. Councillor Taylor, was it a follow up?
Yeah, just a quick point, Chair. You know, I almost want to say I think it's a bit out of order that an officer felt obliged to explain to me that money doesn't grow on trees. Maybe that's just a figure of speech, but you know, this idea of decorum, I think works both ways. I think I've been quite reasonable in my questions, and you know, I'm not an expert, but I'm not thick either. So come on.
I apologise. I didn't mean it to cause offence. We are having to make some really difficult decisions over the next few months. And and our city is one of them.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Healy, a separate question?
It's a new question, Chair.
Thank you.
On page 15, you've got target for further mitigation, 1 million, 1 million and two, anyway, just over 1 million. 21,000, yeah. Have you got, and feel free to provide this to the committee afterwards, the individual schemes that make up that figure?
The target for further mitigation.
Target for further mitigation, 1 million and
No,
21,000.
because that is unachieved. That is a target to achieve further mitigation. So that is the gap between what we currently have on paper as mitigation and what we still need as mitigation. So that is a to be identified.
To be identified. So supplemental on that then. Given this is the end of monitor 2, monitor 3 finishes the end of December, I believe. Will that 1 million be identified in monitor 3?
Possibly, possibly not. I haven't finished monitor 3 yet. We are putting the report together now. It'll come to executive in January. So we're not sure which scrutiny committee it'll come to. I don't expect to be able to identify balanced budget by monitor 3.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ian and Debbie. Paragraph 15 talks about across all service areas, managers are being tasked with identifying mitigations that will reduce these pressures. These include holding vacancies. I'm aware that if you hold a vacancy, the work still needs to be done. And there are certain areas of performance that the council have to complete. And in order to hold a vacancy, that almost will create overtime. So in those areas where overtime is being paid, I can't see a line anywhere or a budget that talks about overtime. And it would just be really helpful for this committee to see a line for overtime so that we can make sure that we're not trying to make a saving in one area, but actually by default are overspending in another, if that makes sense.
Yes, no, absolutely makes sense. What I would say is we report by service, not by the kind of type of expenditure. So to give you some assurance, though, we do have a cost control panel. It includes myself, includes Ian, includes our head of HR and Ian Floyd as Chief Operating Officer. And we just this last week actually looked at overtime, didn't we? So we are very aware of the fact that by holding vacancies, what we're trying to do is we are expecting directors to manage this, obviously, but there are exceptions. We are out to recruit. You'll see from the council's website, we are recruiting to post. It's not a blanket freeze on any vacancies. And we are dealing with it team by team. So there are some areas where you absolutely can reprioritise the work and you can look at things differently. And frankly, you can stop doing certain things. And that is ongoing. But we are keeping an eye on overtime, to exactly as you say, to make sure that by reducing vacancies, we're not just increasing overtime. And obviously, we don't want to put unsustainable pressure on teams, on staff members. We are very aware of that. There's anything else to add in on that? Is there?
No, so Debbie's talked about corporate cost control meetings. I mean, I'd just give the assurance to the committee that all the directorate management teams run performance clinics, performance meetings. Overtime has been something, and additional hours, which is a similar kind of payment mechanism, has been discussed by those directorate management teams on a monthly basis. It's tracked at a team level, so it's looked at. And anything that pops out as an exception is discussed with the directors or brought to the corporate cost control meeting. So I think the checks and balances are in there to stop them moving across.
Councillor Widdowson.
It's a completely different question. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Right, I think it's one for you, Ian. So just below point 20, we've got a table on air quality, and it says that it's looking at 3 specific areas. Given what's gone on in Gillygate, when we gated it and moved the traffic around the rest of the city, how are we going to measure the impact across the entire city for the air quality? What are your thoughts on that?
I think my first thought is speak to Mike Southcombe and Andrew Giller. Okay, I think realistically, those 2 individuals, obviously the experts within the authority, they've talked to me a number of times about various ways of capturing performance in this area. Happy to come back to you, but I would revert back to them, who are experts in the area.
Okay, if you could come back to me, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, members. In terms of any actions arising from that discussion, obviously we spoke about different forms of communication. We have at a previous meeting discussed at a high level the council's approach to consultation, and Claire Full took part in that discussion. That was largely aimed at the local transport strategy consultation. Is there an appetite amongst members to do either set up a task and finish group, or to receive a report on, particularly in relation to communication with residents around budget setting, or about some of the difficult decisions and trade-offs that we've been discussing, and Claire Full mentioned that having a cost benefit analysis would be a good thing to have, but is that a realistic? How would that be done? Who would do it? Do we want to have a discussion around the desirability of undertaking that kind of piece of work, or to receive a report from officers explaining what would be required to do that? I'm looking for suggestions from members as to how they would like that, whether they would like that discussion to continue, and if so, how. Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. I'm trying to not sign up to more things at the minute, because the ward should come first. But I think this is a fundamental issue in this administration. So I'd be happy to be part of a task group looking at how the council communicates to the entire city's residents and doing an analysis based on that, provided it would be listened to, because I don't want to draft for weeks or months with other members if it's just going to become another document that exists somewhere online that nothing happens to. There's enough emails like that. So look, that's an expression of interest. If other colleagues want to mull it over, I could bring something to the committee at the next meeting, some sort of scoping paper, so it'd be a sort of list of proposals, how we might go about it, and if members want to put their hands up, then fair play. I don't know how you want to handle it, but
no, I think that's thank you for articulating that. I think that's a helpful starting point, and hopefully if other members, we can circulate an email after the meeting asking for expressions of interest, and then so it doesn't all fall on you. If a small group of members want to work up a potential kind of scope in terms of aims and objectives, but being kind of realistic and reflecting that, as most of us know, if we want things doing in scrutiny, we have to do it ourselves. That's the reality of the situation, but that's not a reason why we shouldn't. Councillor Eyre?
Happy to support that, and if you want any work in terms of building up Councillor Taylor, happy to do that. One suggestion I was thinking in terms of how you embed it is that we always have those sections in the back of every report, and if we can come up with something through that consultation, through that process, that actually says fill this in the consultation section, that says this is the best practice identified by scrutiny, have you done all of that in terms of this consultation, then that will start to show up in each document. We'll actually know you didn't listen to scrutiny on that one, you didn't listen to that one. So it's those paragraphs at the end that say financial, legal, risk, etc. So often forgotten, but actually they can be really useful tools in actually focusing people's minds on that.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Widdowson?
It's just, I'd support that, but also I'd bring into it the amount of consultations that we're doing as well. So how you balance communications with tiring people out.
Okay, no, thank you for that. It's a really positive way forward. Do you want Dawn?
Can I just clarify, Chair, just so we're clear, so that is specifically about how we communicate? Yeah, and it's communications, and it's not linked to the earlier discussion around trade-off with budget decisions, because I think that's a different debate.
sorry, if I may, I think it would be hard to do a semi-credible exercise without touching on money.
I think it's so, as I see, it's identifying what good, if, you know, good and timely and meaningful communication with residents is the objective, then it's considering all the ways to achieve that, some of which may involve looking at all the financial consequences of doing it one way or
Yeah.
another. So I think there'll be some,
Yeah, and I mean, it needn't be binding. I mean, we could produce a perfect piece of work, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna happen, but we will have to cover finances in it.
Yeah.
And the costs of certain things, staff time, whatever, hard copies.
Yeah.
Paid for social media, the whole lot.
Yeah.
Anyway,
okay, I'm
Yeah,
conscious of not having this,
yeah.
the working group's discussion here, but I think we can fine tune it, and I think if a group of members get together to refine the the objectives and the scope, that yeah, and yeah, being realistic about what we can achieve. Okay. Right. Thank you very much for that. So, and thank you, officers, for your attendance. So we now move on to agenda item 5, net zero fund update. So Sean Gibbons is joining us at the table for this item. We'll get our name tag sorted out. Councillor Rowley.
Just a point of order, Chair. I'm aware that there are public participants that are moving this side of the far table. There are confidential documents on laptops that a member of the public could see. There is water at the end of the table there. There was no need to move to this side. Can I ask you please to ensure that members of the public stay that side of the camera?
Sorry. That's fine. I take your point, but there aren't any confidential papers being discussed at the meeting. I think there is. We know there are well-known issues with acoustics at this meeting, which means that sometimes people have to stand nearer to a speaker to hear what's going on. But I'm not aware of whether there are rules as to where people can sit or stand at the meeting.
Non-written, Chair.
No, okay.
Non-written.
But there obviously is a public seating area, but if in order to hear a debate, a member of the public needs to stand next to a speaker, then okay. Right. Sean, welcome. Thank you for your update report. Would you like to give us an introduction, please?
Thank you. So Sean's going to set out for you today. This is the first of 3 devolution papers, I think 3, yeah. And this paper sets out the success, if you like, and the benefits of the Net Zero Fund, which is one of the funds that have come from the devolution deal. It's one of the upfront funds, if you like, prior to the combined authority being established. And the paper sets out, I guess, the benefit to the council and to the city and where that funding went, and also sets out the process by which we got here. And it leads into the next 2 papers. So you might have some questions, scrutiny committee members, that also actually refer to some of the papers, some of the reports that come later on, and we'll just help through that as we go, if that's okay.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this paper sets out the process that the council have been through in the application to the Mayoral Combined Authorities Net Zero Fund, £7 million Net Zero Fund, which stretches back best part of 12 months now. The process starts in January this year, when we shortlisted projects for expression of interest. Those projects were filtered down internally by the council, and then full applications were submitted for a number of projects, which were then appraised by the combined authority team or the local enterprise partnership instead of combined authority, and then resulted in the award of just short of £3 million for 7 council projects, and sets out the next steps for those projects being delivered over the next just short of 18 months by March 2025. The information set out in the report for you. I think I'll stop there and take any questions.
Thank you very much for that. This is one paper that straddles two of the areas that this committee covers in terms of devolution and climate change. We had planned to talk about carbon counting and scope 3 emissions at this meeting, but we've put that back to a later meeting so we can have a more meaningful discussion. So I think it is an area that as a committee we need to be aware of and also aware of potential future opportunities. And that was going to be my first question. Obviously, this is a pipeline of schemes that have gone through a process of identification and challenge against the criteria in terms of deliverability. Do you think this was this likely to be a one-off, or is it likely, obviously depending on decisions made by the combined authority when it's sort of formally instituted, is this likely to be a longer term sort of pipeline of schemes?
I can't answer with confidence, but the schemes that were unsuccessful, that haven't gone forward, we have been contacted by the LEP to keep conversations open. I think it's their expectation that there will be a longer term pipeline of investment for our projects. So even those projects that aren't being funded here have the potential to be funded in the future.
Okay, Claire?
Just to add to that, one of the ambitions of the combined authority is to be the first carbon negative region in the UK, and of course net zero projects contribute significantly towards being carbon negative. And then coupled with that, the recent, well, not that recent, but the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero are looking at funding different projects as well. So combined with the combined authority and that newish department, I think we're relatively confident that projects will continue to be funded.
Thank you. Councillor Widdowson.
Just given the report that we had from the previous officers, how confident are you that we've got the officer capacity to deliver these projects?
Majority of the projects will be delivered with existing capacity that we've identified, existing project management. There might be the need for some additional capacity to deliver one or two of the projects that we've identified. With that funding being ring-fenced, I think there's more scope for that capacity to be brought in.
I'll take that as yes, we have the capacity to deliver.
We're confident we do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we can keep a track on those projects as they go through.
Yeah, it might be one of the things that members of this committee are interested in, an update, a point on how delivery is going on these projects.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up, obviously when bids are submitted, the best estimate is made of likely cost. I know from experience of some projects in my ward that the cost tends to be higher when the project hits reality. Is there a degree of contingency built in the event that there are some unforeseen issues that mean that the cost of delivery is higher than anticipated? I'm just conscious of the risk of the project not going ahead because of some issues arising which weren't foreseen when at an earlier stage.
Yeah, cost inflation is a very real risk, and with as I said, this process starting almost 12 months ago, we have already seen cost estimates increase for some of our projects that we're looking to deliver. But there was a revision of those cost estimates in September, so they are, we would think, fairly accurate now, and we have made provision for cost inflation next year during delivery as well. So there is some buffer built into the funding that we've requested.
Okay, thank you for that reassurance. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. I was at a meeting last night with some North Yorkshire councillors, and they were discussing the issues around renewable energy schemes, and the biggest problem they are facing in North Yorkshire is getting the grid to actually cope with the connections. I mean, we're obviously only looking at feasibility studies, but I think the first thing you need to establish is, can the national grid accommodate the extra energy that's been put into it? Because some schemes in North Yorkshire are having to be shelved for 10 years because they can't get a connection to the grid. The grid system is not adequate to accept the energy they're generating.
John?
Yeah, that's a risk we're aware of, and it's built into the projects. It's a very real risk. You're right, we're working with the local distribution network operator, Northern Power Grid, on that. We're engaging with them regularly to discuss our plans and concerns around connections. Their line will be, there's always a connection available. It just might be very expensive and very time consuming to get that, but technically there is always a solution that they can deliver, and that just builds into any future. We have to build that into any future business case.
Thank you, just as long as you're aware of it.
Councillor Douglas, was it a new point or a follow on?
No, it's a comment on that particular question, and
Yeah.
this is a national problem that everybody who is trying to do, it doesn't matter whether it's a green project, net zero, or whether it's development of any type, it's a problem everywhere. So I met recently with the one of the managing directors of Northern Power Grid about this particular problem, and North Yorkshire, we're representing the region, and in fact across Yorkshire with Yorkshire Leaders Board as well. So it's an ongoing conversation. There's a lot of lobbying being done to try and increase the improvements to the grid so that those timelines and also excessive costs are brought down. But it's something that we absolutely need to keep an eye on, because it is having an impact on the fantastic development projects and, you know, the pipeline that York has at this point in time, and North Yorkshire have. So we're fully aware of it and doing what we can. And I have been assured by Northern Power Grid as well that when the local authorities bring forward projects, as long as it's identified that those projects are associated with a local authority, that they're given some form of priority above speculative private projects as well. So we're constantly working on both aspects of that.
Thank you. Councillor Widdowson.
It's just listening to that. We've got down here the Harewood Wind Solar, which I'm fully aware there's also other projects within that area. Are you at liberty to say what the impact would be from the lack of, you know, the fact that you can't actually get the connection because it's either too costly or it's just not available, the impact on that particular project, or is that still all under commercial?
Yeah, I wouldn't like to go too much into the detail of it, but we are aware of the other schemes that are coming forward, and we're in conversation with them and engaging about that cumulative impact and cumulative benefit. But yeah, I don't want to go too much into the detail, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Chair. On table 23, your outputs, if you divide your tons, is that tons of carbon dioxide? I don't know what the E stands for. Equivalent, yeah. If you divide that number by your 30 megawatts, for each of them, you get different outputs. Why is that?
Am I looking?
So if you divide 1730 by 30, it's about 60. You divide 300 by 2, it's 150. You divide 8,308 by 32, you get 270. I would have thought they should all come out roughly the same.
Yeah, I'll have to go and check that and provide a written response to you, Council.
Okay, that's fine.
Councillor Fisher can do the maths with you after the meeting.
It's because solar schemes don't operate all the time, so they may have a peak output of 30 megawatts, but they don't provide it during the night, for example, whereas wind power is often 24 hours, depending on the wind blows.
Thank you. Councillor Merritt.
It's coming back to the previous issue about Northern Grid. Obviously, welcome what the council leaders said in terms of her discussions with Northern Grid. But I mean, it obviously is a concern if there's serious demand on the system, and that in effect there's just not a bidding up process, which is going to cost everybody an absolute fortune. But more particularly, if there is extra money to be paid, is that actually going to deliver extra capacity in terms of the necessary numbers of people and supply chain that will actually genuinely increase the ability to do these connections at a faster rate, rather than, as I say, simply paying a premium to a monopoly supplier. So I hope we're having those wider discussions with them. Opportunities for new jobs and green skill apprenticeships.
Who'd like to have a go at that? Councillor Douglas.
I can say something that folks likely won't like very much, but we have an election period coming up, and with some political parties, they recognise that this is a national serious problem, and there is a commitment to invest in the power grid across the country, and that is absolutely what's needed, and it's a case of underinvestment for far too long. So basically, governments need to pull their finger out and get with it, because otherwise nobody's going to be able to deliver on any projects, are they? So roll on investment in the power grid.
Thank you. Sean?
Yeah, there was earlier this year a consultation on how to restructure the energy system to make it work better to support net zero and net zero projects, and we're expecting those recommendations and changes that relate to those recommendations to come into force soon, and will hopefully help with the current situation. I can't really speak on behalf of Northern Power Grid and what their plans are, but they are clearly a key enabler for our own decarbonisation plans in the city and across the region.
Thank you, Sean. Any other further questions from members? Councillor Eyre?
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of the 3 feasibility studies in paragraph 23, what is the anticipated cost of those schemes, and is the funding in place? Wouldn't necessarily be the case, but is there a realistic chance that funding will be identified?
Yeah, I can come back to you with estimated costs for that. So we're looking at cost region, typically for these types of schemes, around £1 million per megawatt. So you can do some quick maths there based on the megawatts for the project. So £2 to £4 million for your Wigginton wind feasibility, £30 million for your Herwood wind project, and ballpark 20 to 30 for the Elvington Lane PV project. We don't have that level of capital to invest as a council, but we are working with Department of Energy Security and Net Zero to create an investment vehicle to support the investments and delivery of those projects. And it might be, if the business case works, that there will be public or private or joint sector investment in those schemes. So it will depend on the business case.
Claire Fowle, do you want to come in on that?
I was just going to echo that. The part of the building the feasibility case, and certainly the full business case, is to look into the financial viability of the project, and then through that work out the best approach. So obviously it can't possibly be public sector money, but it could be a partnership. It could be a partnership with a Mayoral Corporation Fund. It could be a partnership with a commercial partner through the DESNES funding opportunity. So there's all sorts of different ways that could make it reality, but it is way too early to sort of make predictions about which way that might go at the moment.
It's just that it's £350,000 that we're spending. If it's completely waste of time, then that's £50,000 we've lost. So it's just getting some level of comfort that if that business case does stack up, there is likely to be something at the end of it.
Councillor Douglas.
Yeah, moving into a combined authority has some elements of concern for some people in some places, but what the benefit is that in order to bring in private investment into the region through leveraging of that gain share and the opportunity that it brings with conversation with Whitehall is absolutely huge. and around net zero particularly, and level 4 of devolution, the opportunities that that brings. And we're part of the Yorkshire Humber Climate Commission now, and the big element of that is the looking at green investment funds for decarbonisation, and that's where we're going. So we have to be ready for that. As members have said many a time, we have to make sure that we're ready to take the opportunities when they arise, because if we don't, then others will. And so I have to say, you know, it's not easy, but I'm very optimistic about the kind of investment that we can bring into York and also the wider region. So the opportunity's out there. We've just got to get on with it, essentially.
Okay. Any further questions, Councillor Widdowson?
It's not really a question, it's just a comment. It's good to see these projects. It's good to see them coming forward. I know there's always going to be an element of risk because they're always in everything that you do. What will be really interesting as well is to see what the future pipeline is and how those financial vehicles are put together. Because I do understand exactly from Councillor Ayres' point of view that we don't want to be seen to be frittering money away, that we do want to get the gain share, that we do want to make sure that this is happening. So robust projects that can come through. It'll be interesting to see how these ones land and how we build on them.
Okay.
Just to say that would be a really good, I think, if the scrutiny committee agree, opportunity to bring that back to the scrutiny committee. So there's a degree of work we need to do to get to that point, obviously, but that is something that this scrutiny committee can look at in two levels, one through the devolution and then also through the climate change net zero agenda.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll, in the course of our work, we'll keep an eye on this batch of projects and any others that come forward, and other opportunities that we want to take advantage of. Councillor Healy, was that a new question?
Totally new question. Thank you, Chair. Given the fact we're talking about carbon reduction here, is there any reason why we keep leaving the windows open in this room? Because I'm getting very cold.
Not really a relevant question.
No.
In relation to this report, but that's something we can pick up outside of the meeting.
Well, if we could do at our earliest convenience, it would be most helpful.
But you came prepared with your jacket and your scarf. Okay. Any other relevant questions? Sorry, Councillor Burton. Okay. Well, there you go. Let's have a working group on opening windows. Right.
Oh, James,
Anyway.
James taking action.
There you go. Councillor Merritt.
Clearly, it would be helpful to have those further reports and to keep track of this and the work that's been done and doing on the feasibility studies for those future schemes and endorsing that approach. But I think it would be helpful if, as part of our conclusions, we specifically congratulate the team on what they've achieved here. I mean, it is a tremendous result. We've got some stars here. Thanks very much.
No, and I think obviously a lot of work has gone into bringing forward the proposals, as Sean mentioned. Work started over a year ago, and obviously through that process, a number of projects have been identified as having legs, and they've gone forward and got funding for either delivery or feasibility study. So it's good to see that we've got the skills within the council. I know that on one of the schemes that's in my ward, which I was sort of keen to learn more about, and I know that officers are going to meet with members to better understand the details of that scheme and potential applicability in other settings. So again, it's good for do tell members what you're doing. Don't assume we will know everything. Quite the opposite. Do tell us whether there are things that are happening that we can offer support where we can, particularly in terms of helping residents understand some of the changes they might see, which there may be some nervousness about. Then do work with us. Okay, thank you, members, for your contributions. Thank you Thank you, Sean. Are you staying, Claire? Or... Very good. Yes, Sean, you don't need to stay, Sean. So we now come on to agenda item 6. Sorry. Please, if any members would like to go and acquire some extra clothing. Okay, that's fine. So we'll have a short pause while people go and get jackets. Agenda item 6, an update on York and North Yorkshire devolution and the establishment of the Mayoral Combined Authority. What I propose to do is seamlessly flow from agenda item 6 into agenda item 7, and in essence take them as one item of in a number of parts. So we've got some new officers who joined us at the table. Welcome. Got Sam Blythe. Would you like to introduce yourself, Sam?
Hi, thank you, Chair. I am Sam Blythe. I'm a strategic manager in the corporate policy and city partnerships team, working closely with colleagues in North Yorkshire and the LEP on devolution.
Thank you. And Suzanne, welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Suzanne Harrington. I have been here before. There's a few people going, oh, I know you. At the moment, I'm doing 2 days a week at North Yorkshire, supporting the creation of the combined authority, and I also work 3 days a week at Wakefield Council because I just haven't got enough fun in my life.
Thank you, Suzanne. And Bryn, you're part of this team too.
I am the chair, so Bryn Roberts, obviously I'm the director of governance. Yes, I've had a degree of oversight of much of this.
Thank you very much. So Sam has helpfully prepared a report setting out how we've got to where we are, which when we discussed this thought it would be helpful for all members, but particularly for newer members to understand the the journey we've been on to get to this point in time. And obviously I'll ask Sam to introduce that, and members are obviously able to ask any sort of questions of Sam as to the process. We'll then I'll ask Bryn to introduce his report relating to combined authority governance, and in particular the draft combined authority constitution, which I'm pleased that a version of it has been made available to members. I know it's also been published in advance of the joint devolution committee meeting happening later this week. I appreciate members haven't had an awful lot of time to consider the draft constitution. That is, I think, largely as a result of the timing of other meetings that meant that we weren't able to have sight of it. But we are where we are, and hopefully we can have as good a discussion as we can on that particular document. So I'll start by asking Sam to give us a brief overview of where we are in terms of the establishment of the combined authority.
Thank you, Chair. So the paper before you basically sets a brief background of work to get to the point we are now in the creation of the combined authority, starting back in February 2020, and then working through the different agenda items at council and executive, majoring at City of York Council, also leading to work of the joint committee, which has been established. As you say, Chair, I think it was a useful background document just for members to be aware of the process to where we've got to so far, looking ahead to the creation of the combined authority in early January. Just to note as well, members may be aware that Parliament is scheduled to debate the order for the creation of the combined authority tomorrow. and there's also a grant committee of the House of Lords scheduled for Wednesday as well. So things are very much live as we speak.
Thank you very much. Admirably succinct. So, members, are there any questions in relation to how we've got to where we've got to, Bryn?
Can I just briefly clarify, Chair, that the consideration that's happening tomorrow is by a committee of the House of Lords. It then moves to a committee of the House of Commons on Wednesday. And thereafter, once that's, we assume, approved by those two committees, then it can get listed in Parliament for debate if required and ratification.
Thank you. Updating us on the parliamentary choreography. Members, any comments or questions on the report and where we're at? I've got one to start with. Paragraph 22 on page 36, which states member engagement on the alignment between City of York Council and the combined authority will enable continued reflection on how the two authorities are working together to meet the needs of York. I kind of read that a few times. Thought, well, what would that mean in practice? Because I think there is an appetite amongst members to engage in this process, but not fully kind of understanding how we can, and a sense that we want to be involved in further shaping arrangements, accepting that a decision was made in February of this year, following the consultation on the asks and the scheme to kind of to go with this. How do you envisage member engagement on the alignment between CUIC and the combined authority kind of progressing going forward? Claire?
So it's obviously early days and this is all new to us. We're working on an internal process to make sure we fully understand how the council wish to work together to fully engage the mayor. And then we hope through that process to be able to come to scrutiny and share the initial thoughts before we go too far. I'm having a conversation with Darlington actually next January to talk to them about how the council works in the same sort of way to engage the Teesside mayor. So that internal, if you think of it as two organisations that are combined to work together, the way one of the organisation understands the entirety of what the ask is of another organisation in a way that is joined up and makes sense and is appropriate and timely is really important for us as it is for them. So we're just sort of teasing that out. Yeah.
Suzanne?
Yeah, if I can just add to that. One of the things about the combined authority which makes it somewhat different from other types of local authority is that the constituent authorities are the members and the mayor is an elected member. The mayor is the only elected member of the combined authority. The members who sit there from the constituent authorities are elected to their constituent authorities and then appointed by their constituent authorities, and they sit on the combined authority as their constituent authorities. So in terms of how you participate, City of York Council is a member of the combined authority, and your internal processes back at City of York Council can be put in place to ensure that when your representatives are attending the combined authority, they are doing so in that capacity. So there's something about understanding that, because it is slightly different to other types of local authorities, and it is important then that back in your constituent authorities, you understand how you want to feed that process through to your representatives when they attend, because they attend as City of York Council.
No, I think that's helpful to understand, and I know we've thought about how we can use scrutiny as a potential vehicle to consider issues that are coming before the combined authority, on which the City of York Council, we are represented by the leader and deputy leader. So it's how as members who are not representative, who are not on the combined authority, we can feed in comments so that our representatives on that combined authority can take those views into account. Councillor Douglas.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, and I just wanted to say to members that this has been a very live conversation about how members have the opportunity to feed through to me and Councillor Coulbain as the representatives on the combined authority. And obviously there are other local authorities that have been doing this for quite some time. And we're keen to learn from their experiences of good practice and things that haven't worked so well, so that we can get this right and that everybody feels connected to the combined authority, because at the end of the day, the principle of a combined authority, and some will tell you it hasn't always run like this in other parts of the country, is to be a combined authority. Often it's seen as this separate entity, but it shouldn't be. It should be that York and North Yorkshire working together with the mayor for the best outcome for the region. And the majority of the elected representatives are within the local authorities. So it's really key that we get this right. I'm very keen to make sure that we do, so that everybody feels part of it where it's appropriate, but also it doesn't put an excessive work burden on everybody, because when you start to think about what we do already, it's how we feed it in through the process. So that's the work that Claire's doing at the moment, looking at other examples, and I'm sure we'll bring back some information that can be assessed, and an appropriate route found to get us all involved, essentially.
Thank you. Bryn, you wanted to come?
Chair, at the risk of bleeding into the next report, I'm happy to distribute, if members would like, a couple of charts, one which shows the makeup of the combined authority as it will be, and another which shows the proposed committee structure under the constitution as it's written at the moment.
If you can email them after the meeting, and presumably those diagrams are in the public domain, and this is nothing new. Or
this is nothing. As I understand, this is information that Mr. Khan, who's the monitoring officer at North Yorkshire, presented to their scrutiny committee a few days ago.
Okay.
And as I say, all of this is contained within what either the draft order and the constitution that's set out in there, or in the document that's in the public domain.
Yeah.
If that helps members understand how these will tie together.
Yeah. No, I think that the more information we have, the better, not just for members, but for residents.
Would you like these
more
around?
widely. You can do.
Up to members.
Councillor Merritt.
Hear your comment there, but it's also about timing as well. And I think, the fact that the public have only seen this document over, in effect, 3 days, is a very unsatisfactory position to be in. I mean, I'm assuming actually the bulk of the work on this draft constitution was done months ago. It's basically probably only had to be tweaked once the final order was confirmed, and that was 6 weeks ago. So I think it's very unsatisfactory that this has come out in the way it has. What I'm assuming the pressure now in terms of getting it adopted is that until it's adopted, the new combined authority can't actually make any of its urgent decisions in terms of distributing money. Because I know this is bleeding into the next item, but I think it is pertinent in terms of the point that was made by the public speaker about actually giving the public enough time to consider this document and whether there's any scope for flexibility on that.
Okay, so are there any further questions on Sam's report before we move into constitution talk? I'll take that as a no. Would Suzanne and or Bryn like to set the scene for the draft constitution, please? Okay, thanks, Suzanne.
Yeah, okay. So, yes, I do take the point about timing. It is, though, quite a challenge because the combined authority is somewhat different to, as I've said, a local authority in terms of how it's set up. And every combined authority is subject to its own statutory requirements, so it's not entirely like you can just lift and shift from one to another. So we are working quite hard to get to the bottom of some of the difficulties. That said, a lot of it is relatively straightforward. The stuff you'd expect to see in there, like contract procedurals, financial regulations, standing orders, and the like. There is, of course, no executive and no cabinet and full council split. It's a completely different animal. It is a combined authority and committees of the combined authority. Okay, so I'll run through a couple of things. I just wanted to pick up the point that was raised earlier about the difference in papers, and I'm going to look at Bryn here, who may or may not be able to confirm that I'm right on there. I think what's happened is, because there was a lift and shift completely of the governance documents from the police and fire, and there's been no real discussion with them about the extent to which there's duplication in there, because they have financial regulations and contract procedure rules. I think it was felt that the public document, we should take them out again, because they are likely to be subject to some real significant change. So it's not any attempt to be less than transparent. It was just not to put things into the public domain that we haven't really discussed in any depth with the police representatives. We have a meeting next week when we're going to get to the bottom of the extent to which that can be lifted and shifted, and the extent to which some of the duplication can be taken out, so we don't have two sets of procedure rules around the same thing. And this is where the complexity comes in, because technically they don't come in till May, but we do need to have some understanding of how it's going to work fairly early. So we're on with that. So I don't think it was any, I think I'm right in that it was the part 9 stuff that was taken out.
Right at the end
yeah.
of the constitution.
And we probably, I mean, that stuff that'll be in the public domain because it'll be their constitution. But so it wasn't anything that's sort of secret. It was made the document in the public domain, shows a more accurate reflection of what's actually been partially agreed so far. So that's where we are. I just wanted to address that point. Okay, so as we're aware, the order we're expecting to be made, to be signed off sort of early in January, and the inaugural meeting will, Councillor Merritt's quite right, have to take place to put in place the governance arrangements to facilitate the combined authority being able to take decisions and operate. We are going to try and get the document ready before then if we can, and I'm more than happy that as soon as we've got a final draft that everybody says that's the document that's going forward, I'm happy for it to be published. I don't think we need to necessarily wait until, you know, the publication of the inaugural papers. I think we get it out there as soon as we can, just to give people more time to look at it. But we are working hard. The report sets out the basic governance structures. As I've mentioned, it's important that we recognise that the representatives from the constituent authorities sit there as the constituent authorities, because the membership of the combined authority is the 2 councils and the mayor. And to that extent, there is quite rightly a discussion to be had in each authority as to how they want to inform, advise, consult, etc., with their representatives when they're attending those meetings and taking those decisions on behalf of their authority, because the order does give that decision-making power to the lead member of each constituent authority. The paper also sets out some of the sort of nuances around decision-making, where it's clear that, for example, where there's things delegated directly to the mayor but impact on one of the areas more than the other. So the good example that's given in there is if the mayor were to pursue a compulsory purchase of land and it was in the City of York's district, the lead member for City of York has to agree to that. And if he or she does not agree to it, then it is not passed. So there are some checks and balances in there, and I'd draw your attention to Appendix A to ensure that where something's having a particular impact on one of the 2 constituents, or both for that matter, then there are some checks and balances in place around that. I'd also like to draw your attention to the fact that there is, of course, a scrutiny committee, that the combined authorities, all their decisions are subject to scrutiny because it's not an executive arrangement. So the decisions of the combined authority are subject to scrutiny, and it is proposed that 6 members are nominated from each constituent authority, a total of 12. The issue there is it has to be politically balanced based on the political balance of both organisations, and at this point in time I'm very relieved that I'm not going to be doing that calculation. So you will be invited to nominate the appropriate number of members reflecting that political balance. And it's also should be noted that the chair and vice chair, although appointed by the combined authority, if the elected mayor is a member of a political party, then the chair and vice chair of the scrutiny committee cannot be from the same political party as the elected mayor. So there are, and we are mindful of the new scrutiny protocol for combined authorities, which we will be putting in place to support the proper scrutiny of the decisions. And as I say, there will be 6 members from City of York Council on that scrutiny committee. In addition, there is an audit and governance committee to undertake the functions you'd expect, and that also includes the wonderful world of standards, which we're all terribly familiar. So the audit and governance committee is there to undertake the role you'd absolutely expect, to look at the financial assurances, the risks that the authorities carrying, how they're being mitigated, and make sure that the compliance and assurance framework is properly managed. The other area we've in discussion about is transport. Sorry, I'll deal with the business committee first. The business committee is an advisory committee, and it reflects a little bit of the sort of LEP functions, the LEP board. So it will be made up of public and private individuals, and the chair of the business committee will have a seat on the combined authority, but is a non-voting member of the combined authority, but is there to give advice. And the business committee, as I say, will undertake similar functions to the LEP board and provide advice and guidance to the combined authority when considering its decision. So the other area that's still up for some discussion is transport, and the combined authority is the local transport authority for York and North Yorkshire. And it's a matter for members to determine whether they feel, and at the moment it seems to be something that they are quite interested in, having a separate transport committee. So I'm at the moment having some thoughts on what those terms of reference might look like in terms of numbers and things and what it would actually do, but there is some support for having a separate transport committee focusing on transport, which is obviously, given the geography of York and North Yorkshire, the fact that York is a very significant tourist destination. You've got all the rural issues around both York and North Yorkshire. Transport's quite a thorny issue that we've got to grapple with. So it's felt that that might sit in a separate committee to allow members the opportunity to really focus on those issues. The report details the remuneration, which isn't great for you guys, apologies, not my fault, the government decided that. So there is no provision for remuneration beyond the mayor, the deputy mayor, and the deputy mayor for policing and crime and the independent persons. That said, I will say this, it is a matter for individual constituent authorities whether they wish to provide additional allowances for members on the combined authority representing the constituent authority, whether that's the lead members or members of committees. But of course you would have to undertake an independent remuneration panel assessment of any proposals. I think we've mentioned the first meeting. It's likely to be, and with a fair wind, sometime in the 3rd week of January, because we're being told that it will be signed sometime during the week of the 8th of January. We then have to allow for the legal 5 working days from the date. So as soon as we've got some white smoke from down south as to what the actual date, the signature is going to be drying on the piece of paper, we'll crack on with that. And like I say, I don't see any reason why we would delay publication of the draft constitution. We'll get it out as soon as we can. But at that meeting, I think Councillor Merritt's pointed out, it's important that we adopt the constitution, appoint external auditors, appoint to committees, etc., etc. All the things you tend to do generally at your annual council meeting in terms of reviewing your constitution and appointing to committees. So in that sense, it's slightly, it is quite similar. PFCC functions is quite complex in that they will come across once the mayor's elected in May, and the mayor will also be the police and crime commissioner or take on that role. We're in discussions with how that works in terms of bringing the two together. And whilst at the moment, the proposal is that the present scrutiny arrangements, and it's scrutiny with a small s for the discharge of the PFCC functions, will continue by the police, fire and crime panel. We would look to discussions about bringing that into a more, just the one body rather than having different panels and different things looking at different aspects, because if you're not careful, you could end up with a situation where you've got two very distinct organisations just over one umbrella rather than one organisation coming together, which I think is what we would like to achieve, although accepting that that might take some time to move those things forward in that way and bring people together. The statutory officers, there was some debate about this prior to finalisation of the order, but the government's very clear there are 4 statutory officers. And 4 only in terms of those functions as the head of paid service, the section 73 officer, which is the equivalent of your section 151, your chief finance officer, your monitoring officer and the scrutiny officer. And again, there's some discussions around that, recognising that there are individuals within certainly the different organisations who undertake those functions now, and how we're going to bring them together and the appointment to those roles. That's really basically it in terms of where we get, in terms of the sort of general situation in relation to the constitution. As I say, it is a slightly different animal. One of the joys of dealing with it is that of the draft order, which I think is about 60 odd pages, I think so probably 30 of them are all just lists of legislation that either do or do not apply. So we're wading our way through that to make sure we understand which bits apply in terms of governance arrangements. So it's not as straightforward as just setting up something very similar to City of York or North Yorkshire. It's quite a different animal, and making sure that the constitution complies with the law, but also the order as well, to make sure that it's in place on day one. I will say I absolutely 100% expect it to be kept under quite close review over the first few months, and certainly up until the mayor coming in, because it is, as I think Claire said, we are learning about this as we're going along. We're talking to other areas, but if you take, for example, Manchester, there's 10 local authorities involved in Manchester, 5 in West Yorkshire. It's very different to North Yorkshire, where there's just the 2. York and North Yorkshire. So again, how that's going to work, it's going to be a slightly different dynamic to what we've seen in other areas, and what might work, for example, in Manchester or West Yorkshire would not necessarily work in York and North Yorkshire. So we've got to be alive to that as an issue of how we're going to work through these issues together, and make sure that the communications and the collaboration is there, and hopefully just bringing everybody into the room, we can bring that forward and make sure that the 2 organisations really start to work as one under the combined authority to deliver the best for the citizens across the whole of York and North Yorkshire, because there's a lot of money at stake here, a lot of money that can do some really good things. So it's really important that we get this right.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive run through. I know certainly when I read through most of the document over the weekend, I was trying to focus on, well, what does this mean from the scrutiny function? And you've given an overview of what that will mean. And so what I'd like to get from this discussion are really are there any key points we would like the leader and deputy leader to take into the meeting on Friday in terms of these are issues or concerns that members in York have raised? I'll start with a query in relation to the makeup of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So I went back to look at what the scheme said, so that when we agreed to move forward. It was on the basis of the scheme that was then put out to consultation. So in terms of overview and scrutiny, it referred to 6 members being nominated from each constituent council, reflecting the political balance of the constituent councils at the time of appointment. So in my head, I thought that as meaning York will decide its 6 on the basis of the political balance in York, and North Yorkshire will do likewise. The draft constitution is worded differently. It talks about places being appointed on the basis of political balance as a whole, not on the basis of each constituent authority. Page 124 of the draft constitution then talks about there being 20 members of overview and scrutiny, not on a 10-10 split. No indication given as to how York and North Yorkshire split would be arrived at, other than there must be at least 1 member from each constituent authority. And again, it talks about political balance on a as a whole basis. So my reading of that is there is an attempt to move away from what was agreed when the scheme was drafted, excuse me, towards an arrangement that seems to me to be slightly unclear and, from a York perspective, a bit concerning. Do I have need to be concerned, Suzanne?
Well, the drafting is incorrect because it's a list from another authority. It is all and has always been 12 members. I will double check this, but I'm fairly certain that the political balance point is in the order, and it's the political balance of the 2 organisations together, not separately. And I need to, but I'm pretty sure that's in the order.
Okay,
so it's the collective political balance.
Okay. So did the scheme, get my chronology right, did the scheme predate the order?
Yes, the order should reflect the scheme, but the government can amend the scheme in the order that they put forward.
Okay. Members, this is our opportunity to ask questions or make comments on the draft constitution. Councillor Widdowson.
When it's a comment, and then it's how we try and take this forward. When we all voted on this and we agreed for a combined authority, it was on the absolute understanding of that scheme, so that it was the political balance of each constituent authority, I think is the phrase that you keep using. So it wasn't the balance of however many, I don't know whether it's 80 or 90 councillors in North Yorkshire plus 40 here. And then what that entire balance was, it was for each to have their own personalities, political persuasions, however you wish to put it, from each constituent authority. We did not agree, when we agreed to go for a mayoral authority, to have it as an homogenous group of, the political persuasion of that 120, 130. How can that be overturned in such a way when it wasn't what we agreed?
The scheme's put forward to the government draft the order. So that's how. All I'll say is, and I mean this not disingenuously, the combined authority represents an area, and what the government will expect is the political balance to reflect the totality of the area.
So,
yeah.
So from a resident's point of view, okay, that political totality means that the York and North Yorkshire very succinctly becomes Tory. That is what they will do. So that is what we've agreed to, even though we didn't agree to it in the scheme. So why wasn't that brought to everybody's attention with the order? And how come we've just got to accept it when it was not what we agreed to?
I don't know if there's anything more you can say in response, Suzanne.
I'm not sure there is. As I say, I do understand the point you're making. What the government will say, and I don't have to argue their position because fortunately I'm not part of them, is that, as I say, the political balance should represent the political balance of the whole of the combined authority area, because the whole of the combined authority is York and North Yorkshire. I think if you were wanting to look at the split, they would then argue, well, should it be 6 and 6? And I'm not suggesting that's a right or wrong argument. I can just see the argument coming back saying, well, York has 47 members, is it still? And North Yorkshire has 90 or 89, I think it is. So we'll split, you know, according to those proportions, which they haven't done. They've said it's an equal split in numbers. It's just so that the representation is 50-50. It's the political balance that they would expect to reflect the whole of the area. And I understand the concern you're raising, and I don't necessarily disagree with it in terms of what you've agreed. It's how they see it in terms of this is a combined authority for the totality of the area. The political balance is this, but because there's 2 participating authorities, they will have equal numbers in terms of representation, so that they will argue that York has as many members as North Yorkshire to argue York's position on any issue. But the political balance reflects how people have voted across the piece, if you see what I'm saying.
Thank you for explaining that as best you can. Councillor Merritt.
Yes, just as a supplementary to understand how that will work in practice. If we look at the combined authorities, 4 members, 2 from each authority, if it's to reflect the political balance, then it should strictly be, if you add the 2 lots of councils together, it should be 2 Conservative, 1 Labour, 1 Liberal Democrat. So how is that going to work in practice, that North Yorkshire has to produce the 2 Conservatives?
No, it's up to each individual authority to nominate their 2 members. There is no political balance required in respect of that.
Right, but there is on the audit.
There is on the committees, yes.
Yeah. So on the audit and governance, it's 2 plus 2 again. So how are you going to achieve the political balance if your 2 largest, absolutely 2 dominant parties are Lib Dems and Labour? So if they had 1 each from York, then North Yorkshire has to produce 2 Conservatives, even though they barely have just over half the council seats.
I understand the point you're making, but it's not a requirement. It is a requirement in relation to the committees, but the order's very clear that the authorities can nominate their lead member and substitute, and it's not a requirement for that to be political balance. Unless, Bryn, I'm wrong on that. I don't think I am. No, it's in the order that each constituent authority nominates 2 individuals to be members of the combined authority, and one of those individuals is stated as their lead member.
Thank you.
Yeah, but I was asking the question about the committees, the audit and governance, the scrutiny, because if each authority nominates its proportion of members according to the balance on its own council, it will not produce the political balance overall. So that means either or one or both of the councils will have to distort its representation to achieve the overall total.
Yeah, we will have to, and I say we, meaning the royal we, not me, work out exactly what those numbers are and have obviously conversations with both councils about how they want to proceed in relation to the nominations to each committee. It'll be your first exercise in collaborative working, I think.
I think it's important we tease out these issues. We won't necessarily have answers to them, but I think it's really important we capture the questions and concerns that we have. Councillor Taylor's next on my list.
Thanks, Chair. If I may, I'd like to just roll this back ever so slightly. I want to understand what's the worst that could happen if we do come back to this early next year, because I'm quite uncomfortable with how this massive document and massively important document has been put to us with next to no notice, let alone the public's chance to have a look at it. We're having a detailed conversation already simply on the political balance aspect. There's probably shed loads of other stuff that needs, going over properly. I mean, I do have specifics to raise in the document as is, but I feel like going into a point or another point sort of gives this really shambolic process credence. So, can't speak for anyone else here, but what would go wrong, if anything, if we said we'll come back to this in the first working week of January, given its importance? I just feel really uncomfortable with this.
No, and I think you're right too, because I think what has become apparent to me is this disconnect between the scheme and the order and the constitution that now flows from the way the order is worded. And I think that's so we're almost having to start again, thinking we'd had these discussions when we were considering whether this was an option we wanted to pursue. We've heard from Suzanne about the timeline that they're working to in terms of order gets signed, constitution gets agreed. I take on board what Suzanne said around it being a living document and subject to review, and the mayor, when he or she is elected, may have other ideas they want to put forward. And fully appreciate, we haven't really had time to properly read this, let alone come up with a coherent, set of questions. It's trying to take advantage of the limited opportunity that we do have, so that the leader and deputy leader, when they go into the meeting on Friday, have a sense of the issues that we have. So I'd rather get them on the table, accepting we cannot have a full and detailed discussion about them all as we would all like to, but I at least want to come up with a list of things that, well, we're worried about this, we don't know what this means, what are the implications of that. I think that's sadly kind of where we're at the moment. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, if we can just test that a little bit, and forgive my naivety if I've missed something. If we did exactly what you've just said you'd like us to do in the first working week of January, does this scupper things? I mean, it'll be an inconvenience, I'm sure, but does it bring devolution down?
No, not at all. The order will not be signed until sometime, we're told, after the 8th of January. The inaugural meeting will not then take place until probably the 3rd week in January, simply because when they say the 8th of January, it could be back end of that week, and then we've got to publish the papers, etc. So no, is the short answer to your question. If, excuse me, members want to, have more input, then that's a matter for members.
Okay.
And we'll try and facilitate that.
I think when we at the end of this discussion, we can decide what we want to do next in terms of further discussion, having had a chance to properly consider all the information. Councillor Fisher, I had next.
Thank you. One question about proportionality. How do you deal with independent members who aren't members of an actual political group? Do we have, and some of them are ungrouped independents at North Yorkshire. There's also, as you may know, North Yorkshire does not have an overall majority for the Conservative group. They rely on the casting vote of the mayor, but they've recruited 3 independent members. Do those 3 independent members become part of the Conservative group as far as the allocation of seats? Because if they do, it actually increases the number of Conservative seats. It's a very tricky situation, how we deal with the whole strategy of political balance.
Political balance is determined in the same way as it is in every council, and if they're not members of the Conservative group, they do not count towards Conservative majority or minority, depending on what the numbers are. Independents, again, if they're not grouped, they are individuals, and their proportion is as an individual of a wider authority. If they are grouped, it, depending on the numbers, will determine what, if any, right they have to place us on the combined authority. So it's exactly the same. It's just done across the piece.
Thank you. Councillor Merritt.
Come back to the timing and discussion issue that Callum raised. I was going to raise it, but I did that supplementary on the previous comment first. At the moment, we have no details in this document on the Transport and Place Committee, which is going to be one of the prime functions of this body. I'm assuming that will have something in place by the time it goes to the first formal meeting of the combined authority after the order's laid in January. So I would suggest that would be another reason why it would be helpful for us to come back and have a further meeting on this special if necessary. But also, Susan, Ms. Harrington very helpfully commented on the fire and police situation. Whilst it's not one of our functions at the moment, it will be a function of the combined authority. I am unclear how that will be scrutinised, because I noticed there's an exclusion in one of the bits of the document that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee of the new authority will not have the responsibility for looking at fire and related services. So who will be? Because I'm assuming that there should be, in principle, some scrutiny arrangements.
Yeah, initially the scrutiny will continue to be undertaken by the panels that already exist for that purpose. I think what we'd like to move to is the scrutiny committee of the combined authority having an overarching, but there's some sensitivities around that, as you can perhaps appreciate. So at first instance I'm trying to think of the date in May. I think the election on the 2nd of May, so it'll be whatever, 6th of May, the date it all comes across. It is envisioned, and we're trying to get the constitution to reflect that now, that they will come across as they are. But I think there's an understanding that there needs to be then some work during the initial months when there's obviously people to get into place, people to get into post, things like that, to look at them, whether that really needs to continue in that way or whether we can move it into an overarching scrutiny committee that covers the totality of the combined authority functions.
Is that section likely to be in place by early January, or is in effect going to be a constitutional amendment?
I'd like it to be. That said, given timelines, resources, etc., depending on the discussions we're having in the next few days, if it can't be achieved, I would rather spend the time on getting the constitution we need for the end of January in place and work on that as we're working into May, than, because it's important that we get something that works for us on when the order's signed, rather than trying to cover all bases and doing everything badly rather than one thing well, if for want of a better phrase. So there's a decision to be made at some point about whether we proceed with that or whether we actually park it for further discussion in February, March time, shall I say.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas, was it supplementary or a new comment?
Yeah, sorry, it's on the kind of structures and processes that we will expect to see over the coming months in this kind of area. Can I just say something?
Yes, yeah.
So I think the other thing, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, that when the elected mayor comes in and they're in place, then they could look at the constitution and the scrutiny structure and make suggestions of their own. And so, you know, many of us have participated on West Yorkshire Combined Authority, and over the years there've been addition of scrutiny panels there for climate change, for example, is one now that I'm sure didn't exist at the beginning. So I think what we are looking at now will not necessarily be the same document by the end of 2024, because it won't be purely our decision on what goes in there, and the mayor will have some quite sway over that.
Thank you. Councillor Healy.
Thank you very much, Chair. New question, actually. On page 53, Appendix A, there's various decision-making criteria sort of scattered through here, which I won't go through in total, but the main question is, will the mayor have the ability to add like a line item onto a council tax bill? So you've got like the fire line, you've got the police line. Will there be like a mayor line?
The mayor does have the power.
Put your microphone.
Just apologies. The mayor does have the power to set a precept, but there are some. I'm just trying to find the bit in here. Whether it says it in here, should do. Bear with me 2 seconds.
Third page, funding the constituents' council must ensure a reasonable cost of the combined authority met. That one.
If it forms though part of the mayor's budget, that has got to have a 3/4 majority. I'm looking at Bryn here, if I'm right, a 3/4 majority of the constituent authority members. So he or she could set one, but of the 4 constituent authority members, 3 of them would have to vote in favour of it. And if less than 3 vote in favour of it, then the mayor's budget is not approved. But it would form part of the mayor's budget.
Yeah. So he can set a precept, basically.
He or she can, but I say only with the approval of 75% of the constituent authority members.
Okay, that's fine. That's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Burton.
A general question on this. So we have this draft constitution and we're looking at it this evening. What's happening in North Yorkshire? They have the same document. Have they already looked?
Their scrutiny committee have already had a look at it and made some comments. Not many, I have to say. So they're not asking to see it again. But that doesn't in any way reflect the fact that you may want to do. It's a matter for members at the end of the day. But yeah, I'm not sure they've looked at it in any depth, if I'm being entirely honest, but they did have a presentation and I was present online to answer questions. So there was quite a discussion, I can say that much.
Just do you know when that was?
Was it the 5th year? It was last week, wasn't it? Or it was last week. It was when was all the awful snow? Because that's the reason I couldn't get to Northallerton. So it was whatever date the snow was, whether it was a Tuesday or the Monday of last week.
So presumably that wasn't a published draft. That was
no.
This is the same as a draft that is going to the Joint Devolution Committee this week.
Yes.
Sorry,
Councillor Burton, I butted in.
Slightly supplementary there. So was that discussion in public? And there's another part that
yes, it was in public.
It was in public.
Yes.
How long did they have to read it before the meeting?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure?
I'm sorry, I don't, because I didn't. It was dealt with through. I drafted some of the report, but it was dealt with through Barry Khan's office.
Was just so everyone's clear, the draft that North Yorkshire Scrutiny Committee discussed, was the draft published? And they discussed it in public, but without the draft having been published.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm sounding vague, but it was handled by Barry Khan's office, and I'm not sure what he circulated to his members. I know he circulated a draft document. I'm not sure when it was circulated. It certainly wasn't published, but the meeting was in public, and the debate was in public.
Okay, I'm not sure how they managed to have a discussion about a document that was presumably exempt, but anyway,
I'm not sure, and I don't want to mislead you. I don't know what he'd circulated beyond the report to his members.
Yeah, okay.
But I think a commitment has been given to members that, as I say, as soon as a final draft, and Fairwind, hoping to get that done as soon as possible, then we'll publish it in both authorities for members to look at.
Yeah, I
if
think
they wish to do so.
Yeah, I think it is important going forward as best we can, appreciating that we've got two different governance timetables. The council's, our AG doesn't meet on the same date as theirs, but it would be helpful if there was an attempt at trying to coordinate as far as possible when information is shared with members, so that we're not, neither authority is playing members on neither authority are playing catch up and have advanced sight before the other. Councillor Widdowson.
So, Chair, what I'm trying to get out of the different conversations that we're having is what we want our lead members, is it on Friday, are going to discuss this. From what I'm picking up, and certainly from the bits, because I haven't read it all, I've only read a tiny bit of it because I've not had time to read it, is there is a significant amount of concern that it's going to be adopted without us having the opportunity to go through and say, actually, this is a draft. So that's a concern, and I don't know how we address that. And as you and several other people in the committee have had the opportunity to read it, we know that there's inconsistencies, and we also know that the scheme, and I'm really annoyed about that the scheme is different to the order, because that is not what we signed up for. And if you add into the fact that when we did sign up for this, it was not a first past the post mayor, I am really uncomfortable with what's in front of us, and it feels a little bit like we're being railroaded, if I'm honest, which was not the feeling that we had when it was initially being discussed. And I don't know how we get those types of ideas, feelings, thoughts addressed on Friday, because this is a fabulous opportunity if we do it right. And it just feels like it's feeling a little bit dicey at the moment.
Okay. So I think there's, I suppose there's two things. There's the kind of detailed read through and identification of a sort of list of issues or concerns along the lines that Councillor Taylor suggested, to try and do something in advance of the Constitution being agreed in, albeit in final draft form in January. We can do that. I'm not sure what would or could happen to our comments on the back of a discussion in early January, other than to be considered for the ongoing review of the document. I think that's better than nothing, because as I see, the alternative is we could say we haven't had time to look at it, we'll discuss it as and when, which again doesn't leave me in a very comfortable place.
If I can try and help, if you are minded to look at it in early January and there are issues within the document that you have grave concerns about, then you can raise them with your lead member in the same way as you would at an annual council meeting. Amendments can be put forward at the inaugural meeting and by the members from the constituent authorities. So whether or not that's an internal matter for City of York Council, whether or not that's something you would want to, you can make recommendations to your lead member that you would prefer this to be looked at.
Okay.
I just feel that the idea that it just goes into some potential review, and it will be reviewed, is perhaps a little bit unsatisfactory for members if they're going to put the time and effort into coming back with particular concerns. I think it ought to go through some formal process for consideration.
No, I think it's helpful for us to understand what we do with any output from that discussion. So that's helpful in terms of helping us understand where that would go. Councillor Eyre.
Thanks, Chair. I think that's a straightforward question. Given it's our constitution, or the Combined Authorities constitution, where the order differs from the scheme, can we not put in the constitution what we want?
No.
I like easy answers.
Okay. Just building on that, is is the order, I mean, the way the constitution is worded is open to a number of interpretations in terms of political balance as a whole. You could interpret that in a number of ways. Could the constitution reflect any ambiguity in the order, or do you think it's the order is so prescriptive in terms of York cannot decide for its 6 members how they are allocated in terms of political party? Is that just, there's no room for interpretation in what's in the order?
The order will determine, the order states that it has to be politically balanced. The Democratic Services officers will, as they always do, tell you what that means for the committee as a whole. There is then a discussion to be had between yourselves and North Yorkshire as to how you want to divvy that up, to be perfectly blunt about it. But I don't think it's anything you can do vis-a-vis the constitution or the order. But certainly there is a discussion to be had about, well, how does that work for each individual authority in terms of who they might want to put onto, because it also comes down to members who have the interest, who have, you know, the skill set, who want to get involved. So there's something around it not just being, you know, names. It should be the right people, the people who, and there is some, and you know, the members of the councils who are going to be the constituent council representatives should have some ideas about who would be best placed to support and make the, because it is important that the scrutiny function is effective. I mean, that it is really important because it is an opportunity for the members of each council to engage in the decision-making process and, you know, and to support and criticise where appropriate and hold to account, all those things. So it is an important committee, as is the audit committee. Well, they're all important, but I can, in terms of, because I'm the governance person, I see those 2 committees as real sort of cornerstones of making sure the governance works and the accountability works and it's there and the transparency works. So there's something more around having a conversation of who would be best placed, because it's you know, an important organisation with an awful lot of money to spend, and it's important that those members in the scrutiny committee are the right members, for want of a better phrase.
So has North Yorkshire's Audit and Governance Committee had an opportunity to review the draft constitution from an audit and governance perspective?
Not as far as I'm aware, no.
Okay, because I think if we're talking about doing a further look at this draft constitution, I think we would need to involve members of our Audit and Governance Committee, because a lot of this is about governance and that's what they do. So I think that would be pretty key, really. Councillor Healy.
Thanks very much, Chair. In terms of making recommendations to the leader for Friday, on page 55, it says funding the constituent councils must ensure that reasonable costs of the combined authority are met.
Sorry, can you
slow down?
Say that again? Because I've no idea.
Slow down. So in terms of recommendations to the leader for Friday, page 55, the 3rd block down, funding the constituent councils must ensure that. Second paragraph, it has cost to be shared by agreement between the constituent councils or in line with the total resident population. Could I suggest that the committee would recommend we do it in line with total resident population? So that's the first point. Second point, has the leader had any thoughts yet on the next paragraph down where it says the costs relating to transport must be met by means of a levy to the constituent councils?
Sorry, what's the question on that?
Well, Councillor Kilbane and herself had any thoughts on the paragraph? The costs relating to transport must be met by the means of a levy to the constituent councils.
So what aspect of that do you want to clarify?
Okay, if it's a levy to the constituent councils, all we're going to end up doing is the combined authority says, I want to spend this on transport. The schemes in York cost 10 million, give me £10 million. Is that not how it works?
This is travel expenses.
We have to pay our own travel.
That's the basic traffic.
So that's cost, so that's not transport, that is getting to and from.
Yes.
Oh, well, forget that question then.
Just, yeah, again, it's hard to understand some of the context of this, but the second paragraph you referred to, yeah, I think we're talking here about reasonable cost of the combined authority. So what your preference would be, that costs are shared only in line with total resident population.
Yes.
Okay. Do any of the members have any comments on that? Councillor Eyre?
Kind of sits with how you're on proportionality, aren't it? If you're taking proportionality across the whole thing, then you have to take that across the whole thing. But if you're being consistent.
Councillor Myers?
It's you know, it's a, I get your point, but I just think to remove the words by agreement between the constituent councils would not, I just don't think it's something we should do at this stage, because we do want to make agreement by constituent councils, and it's important that the line about total resident population is in there so it can be referred to. I think if there is a negotiation. So the example I've got is the police, crime and fire panel. The costs are in the tens of the thousands to each constituent authority per year to run that, for those transport costs and for who is chair or vice chair and things like that. So I think each year the panel puts the amounts to each constituent council and they make an agreement on what's levied. So I think that's just, I think the wording's fine, I reckon, but I guess you've got a concern about it, but I don't think there's a big one. Was that clear?
I think I would argue there are probably bigger issues,
yeah,
that we need to consider in here. And the way I see it is that the in line with total population is a default, unless there is an agreement to share costs on some other basis. So again, I wouldn't get too hung up about that particular aspect. Otherwise, there are lots of other stuff in here we could spend a lot of time going through asking what that means. Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. This will be the last time I go for this. I think if we're in recommendation territory, the one recommendation and only recommendation I think we should make is that we ask the leader to say on Friday that this is not how we're going to do business as part of this combined authority, and that whether it's this constitution or any other sort of decisions and processes, proper time is worked in to the documents that govern us, and not this sort of, oh, it's not ideal, but there's not been enough time, other meetings have happened at a different pace. We cannot work this way. I don't know if the draft constitution covers that at the minute, because I've not read it all. So I think that should be worked in, but the main point being that as a result of that concern, we're going to come back and have a proper look at this in January. We've already heard that North Yorkshire's lot haven't looked at this in any great depth. We can't have the other constituent part of this combined authority doing the same. This is a biggie.
Yeah.
I know it's pain and it's another thing, but it's really important, isn't it?
That's our job.
If we're giving up our time, we might as well.
Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, teacher. I'm also going to confess to having been a very naughty boy, not having read that document properly, because I got it on Friday and I was away to a festival in Glasgow all weekend. So I'm afraid it's not possible for me to read that amount and understand it and give a critical appraisal. I think it's absolutely critical that this goes to a further meeting early in January. And I would also ask that we organise an audit and governance meeting, a special one, for the same time, so that the specialist audit and governance who have dealt with our constitution can have a look at it, because there may be things in there which we haven't picked up, which are critical to this authority. I should also warn you that your North Yorkshire are chewing nails and spitting rust about this whole authority, because we're being given equal status. And I know there's a lot of pressure from some of the councils on North Yorkshire for the whole thing to be revised as soon as possible, so that they become the dominant authority. This has come from North Yorkshire councillors I've been speaking to them last week. So, you know, we have to be very careful how we tread. We have to make sure that things are bulletproof, that our authority is protected, and we can't be stabbed in the back at a later date.
Okay, I'm conscious of time. So I think we need to do two things. Identify key pieces of feedback that we would like the leader and deputy leader to take to the joint devolution committee meeting on Friday, and then figure out what we want to do next in terms of having a further proper review of the draft constitution with a view to identifying any issues or concerns that we would then want to raise internally through our members on the joint devolution committee to be fed into the process as it continues, and ensuring that audit and governance either meet jointly with us or have their own meeting. Suzanne?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get my head around the timescales, because we do need to get another iteration of this document finalised as soon as possible. And I'm just concerned about members spending a lot of time on the document they've got when it's likely to change significantly, and then you're going to be presented with something else. And I can only imagine the frustration you're going to feel at that point when you see another document that doesn't look entirely like the one you've just spent an awful lot of time reading an awful lot of pages. So I'm just trying to get my head round how that might work best for you. So you're looking at the most up-to-date version, and your comments are on that most up-to-date version, which might make the first week in January somewhat of a challenge, given you've also got the time scale of publication to meeting. So I think probably the second week in January might be better, and then we can get something out to you so you can look at it. I'm just trying to be, I don't want members to spend a lot of time and energy on a document and then get another iteration and think, well, what, you know, I've just looked at the wrong thing. So I do want you to see something that's a bit more like the document that's going to go to the inaugural meeting, so that your comments are more relevant. I don't want to sound, or you don't end up commenting on things that are going to change anyway. I don't know if that's helpful. I'm just trying to work through the timescales for you.
No, I think, and I'm happy to be guided by you in terms of what would make best use of our time and give us a maximum opportunity to comment on something that's likely to bear a close resemblance to what will be the final document that's put forward for approval. And that's something that we'll have to think about offline in terms of what, you know, and we need to work from the point at which you advise us that a draft would be available, and we can then use that as our starting point for determining when would work.
There are some meetings next week, which kind of takes up, because I'm only 2 days awake most of my time, but they are important meetings. One's around the Transport Committee terms of reference, and one's with the 2 monitoring officers for the 2 constituent authorities and the police, to try and sort of bottom out where we are with that and what's realistic we can realistically achieve in the time scale. Thereafter, it is literally head down, updating the document to get it out. So it's that kind of timescale I'm working to, and my sort of hope, and it is a hope, fingers and toes crossed, but I'd have it done before we close down for Christmas, so that we can get it published, you know, and people can start looking at it. That would be my hope, but as I say, that is dependent on a number of other things, waiting for contributions from other parties as well.
Okay, I'm keen to draw the conversation to a close as I can. I've got a couple of more hands. Councillor Merritt.
I think that's very helpful suggestion, and we should try to take advantage of that. But you know, I suggest rather than say something concrete in stone, that's something we should work to as things develop. But I think it is important to take the opportunity today to perhaps also, for some of the things that we have general concerns about, to flag, to give the opportunity for them to be taken on board at the earliest stage, as you've been trying to achieve, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
I've got couple that I'd like to raise.
Sorry?
And I've got a couple that I'd like to.
Okay, right. So we'll
to flag.
So are there any other contributions before we agree what yeah, the resolutions we would like the council leader to take into Friday's meeting? Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's more in response to what Councillor Merritt said, and I might be worrying too much here, and I'm open to guidance. Well, I'm slightly anxious about a situation where we give some feedback on some specifics today, but then at the same time say, but we're not happy and we still need more time, and then we do it again in January. Does that lessen the impact that the January feedback will have? It might not. Do you see what I'm getting at, though?
Yeah, I mean, and you mentioned earlier, one of the things you'd want feedback was around process and availability of information. But this committee to have proper time to consider this and then feedback ahead of Friday's meeting. So I'd noted that down as one of the things that you wanted the leader to take into Friday's meeting. So we can, yeah, I hear what you're saying. What I don't want to end up is doing the thing we said we wouldn't do now. We said we would do that in January. But what I don't want to happen is that we said to the leader, well, go to the meeting on Friday and we have nothing to say. We have no comments to make. And I will bring the leader in.
But if that representation was made, Chair, with respect, I'm sure it wouldn't be as simple as that. It would be because we want to do this properly in January.
Yes, but I'm just conscious of not losing the opportunity, and I'll bring Councillor Douglas in to maybe share your perspective on what you've heard and what you think you would want to say on Friday. But I'll bring Councillor Widdowson in first, and then I'll bring Councillor Douglas in.
It's a simple question, Sue. It's what will be the issue if you moved the mayoral meeting back a week to give everybody time to actually have a look at it?
The inaugural meeting?
Yeah. What will be the problem? Because then that will give everybody the time to actually spend looking at it and give the proper changes that people want on the inaugural meeting.
The signing of the order brings the combined authority into existence, so it exists at that point in accordance with the terms of the order. It cannot function though without a governance structure because there's no scheme of delegation, etc., etc. No financial regs contract. So the combined authority technically couldn't function for another week. I'm not sufficiently close to the operational side of things to know what impact that would have.
And that's not something I think we have control over. So
I know that in other places what they have done, and they must have had more clarity on when they were going to get the order. We haven't had an exact date. But I know, for example, when the West Yorkshire Combined Authority was formed, the order was signed on the 1st of April and the meeting was held on the 1st of April. But they must have had, because they published their papers in advance, clear information from the government. All we're getting at the moment, and I'm not being, this is the absolute, is that it will be sometime during the week of the 8th of January, hopefully, if all the debates go right. That's not nailed on. We are optimistic because of, as we said earlier, it's going into the various houses this week for discussion. So fingers crossed, fair wind, but it could be the back end of that week. So
yes.
So is that something we could ask for then? That's something we could ask our representatives to say a bit of time might be sensible.
I think in general terms, we can ask for the maximum amount of time to be made available that, within the realms of possibility, so that any further comments on the draft document can be fed in. I'll ask Councillor Douglas to, I suppose, reflect on what you think you've taken from the conversation in terms of Friday's meeting. I think from, other than Councillor Taylor's point around the process and members not having had sufficient time to feed in, I think the point around the disconnect between the scheme and the order and the constitution is one that I take on board Suzanne's point around it's the order that provides the starting point for the constitution rather than the scheme. I think there is a signs of a sort of trust. There's trust issues in terms of, well, this is what we thought we were getting, and I think that is a concern. But I'd welcome your observations.
Yeah, the things that I've written down are concern around the political balance on scrutiny committees and how that's going to work. Coordinating information when it's shared with members across the constituent authorities. Adequate time for consideration of documents by members in constituent authorities, and that you want to bring the constitution back to this committee in early January for consideration of that more advanced document. That's what I've written down at this point.
Thank you. Without reopening the debate we're going to have in January, I suggest we don't try to do that. But our members' content in terms of very high level themes that we've discussed and concerns that we have, members are content with that. Okay, thank you. In terms of Councillor Merritt. Microphone.
Just like to flag one specific thing. The rules around the scrutiny committee say it has to have a chair, but it leaves the issue of having a vice chair optional. I wonder whether we should be asking to have a vice chair, and that the vice chair should be from the other authority, from the one that is the chair. It just struck me as that might be quite important in terms of ensuring scrutiny and the way it's operated is genuinely cross authority.
Thank you. I think I know the scheme talked about chair and a vice chair. I hadn't twigged that the vice chair had fallen by the wayside between the scheme and the order and the constitution.
No, it hasn't. It's just
Okay.
not a requirement, but it is
Okay.
perfectly possible for
Right.
there to be a chair and vice chair. What the order says is that the chair and vice chair cannot be from the same political party as the mayor.
But the vice chair can exist.
The vice chair can certainly exist, but in terms of who you can have, as I say, the only limit is it must not be. If the mayor is a member of a political party, neither the chair nor vice chair can be from the same political party.
Yeah. Okay.
Which I think is right.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that any more? Or was that?
The other issue is on openness. I was quite concerned when the first joint meeting of the Combined Authority had that actually some quite important papers were entirely in private. I hope that we will ensure that the Combined Authority is open and transparent, but that when things are taken in private, that is properly explained and justified, so that it's not just an issue of referencing to one of the 7 purposes. There's actually a justification, and it would be helpful, I think, if that's fairly clearly laid down in the Constitution, to ensure that there is accountability, that people know that even if they can't see the financial details or whatever it is, they at least know what the general topic is and why it has been taken in public. Because if you actually look at the rules for a lot of the, for many of those 7 reasons, there is actually a balanced judgment in there. You can, in some circumstances, decide that you will take an item in private, but other circumstances you can take a decision to take it in public, and members have the right to ask that an item is taken in public. So I think it is important that the reasons for the initial recommendation as to whether something's in public, in private, are explicitly stated in the agendas that go out.
Okay, thank you. So if that leader can add that openness to the list of issues, Suzanne.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that there's a whole raft of work for the monitoring or interim monitoring officer. There will be in January, won't be me, to do around some of the niceties, that's the wrong word, but some of the technicalities around what you're saying, Councillor Merritt. In particular, where is the need to know in terms of members of constituent authorities, where does that rest? And I think there's a piece of work to be done about understanding. So certainly I would expect overview and scrutiny members to be able to access all private documents considered by the combined authority to undertake the scrutiny function appropriately, because they are entitled to scrutinise any decision of the combined authority. How far that then goes out beyond those members is something I think there needs to be some discussion and thought given to, and I'm not prepared to give opinion because I haven't really had that discussion or thought, but I do think it's something that has to be considered and to get some clarity for members of the constituent authorities about where that sits.
Thank you.
Sorry, it's just one example of a whole raft of things that underpin the governance arrangements to make sure that members of the constituent authorities have assurance about how they can interact and obtain information.
Thank you. So in conclusion, our members' content for the chair and vice chair of A&G and CSCC SMC to get together and with Democratic Services colleagues and think about next steps in terms of, in our case, a further meeting, in A&G's case, a first meeting to discuss an appropriate draft of the Constitution. And we're happy to be guided as to when that might be available that would allow us to schedule that meeting. But we can start looking at potential dates. But it will be important for people to have a lead-in time to review the document, to be able to come to a discussion with suggestions and ideas. Members content with that proposition? Thank you. That concludes that agenda item. Thank you very much, officers, for your contributions. Next agenda item is work plan. That's published on page 57. The one thing, we've got our agenda for January set out. The one thing we need to consider is when we want to take the item that was referred to us by full council of the public switch telephone network changes. The motion passed at council required that item to come to us to decide either for us to review or for us to send it on to a different scrutiny committee. As I see it, it potentially falls under our sort of customer service umbrella. So I think it is best that it comes to us in the first instance. I've got a meeting next week with the council's head of ICT to get a better understanding of the issue and to think about how that might translate into either an information paper to come to this committee, which may lead on to further work. So after I've met with Roy Grant, I'll have a better idea of when he's able to do that and whether we can shoehorn it into January's meeting or not. But I shall liaise with colleagues.
I have potentially flagged that with Chair.
Yes, yeah. So that's on his radar. Are there any other comments on the work plan? No, which takes us on to urgent business, of which there is none. So thank you very much, colleagues, for your work in advance of and at this meeting, and good night.